Let me tell you about Peter. See, Peter was a rather ordinary high school student, though his life was full of mishaps and misfortunes. You see, he was a pretty smart guy, but he was also kind of isolated, a little awkward, and quite unpopular with friends, employers, even family. Well, Peter also happened to have been orphaned when he was younger and was being raised by his aunt and his uncle. Well, as it happened, on a field trip to a science museum, Peter was bitten by a spider. Just so happens that this spider had accidentally received a dose of radioactivity. So when Peter went to bed after having been bitten by that radioactive spider, well, his life changed. He woke up to discover he could climb walls with his bare hands and shoot webs out of apertures at the base of his hands and swing swiftly between buildings. Some of you recognize this story? Yes, of course, the Peter I am talking about is Peter Parker, better known to the world as Spider-Man. That's right, who has become one of the most beloved adolescent superheroes in the comics. Well, in the 2002 version, after Peter is bitten, he ends up in a fight with a school bully. And in the process, he learns that he has gained great power. Well, of course, fighting is not right, so afterwards, his Uncle Ben goes to talk to Peter, and he makes a really important point. And this has been one of my favorite movie quotes of all time. Uncle Ben said, "With great power comes great responsibility." With great power comes great responsibility. Of course, we know Spider-Man goes on with his newly discovered powers to fight bad guys and to work for good. Now, one of the reasons I love this story so much is because, well, I think we are Spider-Man and Spider-Woman. I mean, think about it. It all begins with power, the gift of power. Remember, just before Jesus ascended, he said to the disciples, "Stay here in the city until you have been clothed with power from on high." And when the apostles were gathered in one place, suddenly from heaven there came the sound of a mighty wind, and they were filled with the Holy Spirit. This is great power. This is the power of God living within us. This is the power of the Holy Spirit living and breathing and moving in us. And when we feel that power, we know that God is close to us. But also, when we feel that power, when we know that we are embraced by the fierceness of God's grace, well, then we can't sit still. Because while it begins with power, it doesn't stop there. Because with great power comes great responsibility. Yes, filled with the power of the Holy Spirit, we have a responsibility to get out there and fight for good, to speak of inclusive love with tongues of fire, to break down barriers with understanding, and welcome, to care for the lost and the lonely with a genuine desire for their well-being, to offer compassionate curiosity to those who are different from us, drawing us together as one family, God's family. Yes, this great Holy Spirit power calls us, pulls us, implores us to live our lives for the sake of others. With great power comes great responsibility, and it is our greatest responsibility to love as Jesus loved us. In the smallest of ways, like in our daily acts of kindness, but also in life-altering ways, like swinging from webs between tall buildings to catch bad guys, or standing beside victims of gun violence, or advocating for better mental health care. So, it's really quite interesting to think about Spider-Man as a superhero, because his powers, while they allow him to do good, they don't exactly improve his lot in life, do they? Peter Parker is still kind of awkward, disorganized, easily flustered. He's still very, very human. And so is our experience of a life lived in the power of the Holy Spirit. It is still a very human life. And that's really important. As one commentary put it, when we think back to that first Pentecost, sometimes we look at the apostles with that gusty wind and tongues of fire descending upon them and transforming their hearts, and we believe that the Holy Spirit comes and solves all their problems and ushers in a storybook happy ending. But we know that's not what happens for the apostles. They go on to face great challenges and persecution. So many of them give their lives for their witness. If we were to really look at their stories, we would actually come to realize the Holy Spirit seems to cause more problems than it solves. And in a way, it's true. Discipleship is costly. Responsibility takes effort. But it is the call of the Holy Spirit. Filled with God's great power, it's our responsibility to keep on getting out there, looking for ways to lend a hand, ways to break down barriers and divisions, ways to welcome and love our neighbors. We do that knowing that the Spirit doesn't solve our problems, but does invite us to see new possibilities that we didn't see before. The Spirit doesn't remove our fear, but does grant us the courage to move forward despite our fear. The Spirit doesn't promise safety, but does promise God's presence. The Spirit doesn't remove us from a turbulent world or even necessarily settle that turbulence for us, but enables us to keep our footing amid the tremors. That's the great power of the Holy Spirit. This holy breath in our lungs not only compels us to live a life for the sake of others, but also grants us the strength and the energy to face the responsibilities of a life, this life, with confidence and with joy. So today, this Pentecost Sunday, may you feel the rush of that mighty wind stir in your heart again, calling you to, in visions and in dreams, to a life empowered. And may you use that great power with confidence and with joy, accepting the responsibility of our life of faith. Because with great power comes great responsibility. Yes, may you come to realize that because of God's great love for you, you are a superhero. Thanks be to God. Amen.